I just bought the pack that had
do
2.
3?
I don't even know. All I know, I didn't even have to pair them. All I do is stick the thing in, and they're like prepared. But they were also $25, so I feel like they could
That's pretty good.
stop working at any time.
Are you sending in a reimbursement form for that $25? Because
So-
we don't make any money.
I was going to say 2 crosstabs. Now we officially make negative money plus the domain.
Yeah.
It's like $50 a year
I
because
think I'm paying for the hosting too.
.studio. No, I'm paying for that.
Oh, that's all right.
I decided to cover that this
you're
time.
ahead of me then on
Yeah.
paying for stuff.
When we and I know people think in the Capitol we work 100% of the time, but there's just no way you can do that. And so during one of the times when I needed like a mental break, I had seen an Instagram video about how you can have AI actually generate a song, lyrics, vocals, music, all of it. And so I said, okay, give me a song. I think I said, give me a pop song about the Oregon legislature. And this is what it came up with.
Walking down these marble halls today, got a bill I wanna make it sway. People talking left and right, but we're gonna do this thing tonight. Oh, yeah. Time to make a move, can't afford to lose. Got the votes to prove what we're gonna do. We're dancing back and forth on the Senate floor. La, 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 yeah. Moving bills through an open door. Round and round until we score. This is what we came here for. Dancing on the Senate floor. Representatives and senators meet, trading words to find the perfect beat. Committee hearings all day long, till we finally sing the same song. Oh, yeah. Amendments flying high, watch them pass on by. Gotta give and try, make this bill fly. We're dancing back and forth on the Senate floor. La, la, yeah, yeah. Moving bills through an open door. Round and round until we score. This is what we came here for. Dancing on the Senate floor. When the votes align, and the count is right. Feel that Oregon pride, as we pass it tonight. We're dancing back and forth on the Senate floor. La, 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 yeah, yeah. Moving bills through an open door. Round and round until we score. This is what we came here for. Dancing on the Senate floor. On the Senate floor. Yeah, we're making history. On the Senate floor.
Wow, Reagan, what an incredible song, a fantastic song. You've worked really hard on that by letting the computer do everything. I'm sure it's going to make billions of dollars, might even be as rich as me. Art of the deal, what a great idea.
Donald
Nice
Trump,
one.
everybody.
Yeah. That was great. Good one. The song was actually surprisingly good, to be honest with you. You came running over like you just, found something like a pot of gold somewhere at the end of the rainbow. Like, oh my God, look what I found. And then you played it and I was like, it's actually not bad.
I basically walked around all day playing that song for people and got mixed reactions. People in the House, it was about 50-50, but in the Senate, this song was #1 on the charts.
I'm waiting for the opening. We should ask. Should we put an official request to President Wagner's office to ask that he play it for one of the opening ceremonies?
So I know that his staff has heard it. I've shared it with his staff. I know my dad actually sent it to Obi, and he's traveling, and he shared it with the Secretary of the Senate in California. Has heard the song.
No way. That's great. I can't believe you, Reagan. You're a master.
And I didn't even hardly do any of the work, one simple prompt. But, that's what AI is great for right now. AI right now doesn't care if you take credit. Now, maybe in the future, when it becomes, an official robot person, it's going to be mad that we all took credit for all the work that the robots did. But the voice you heard is actually not, surprisingly, President Donald J. Trump.
What?
He was not available. However, we do have
JD Vance?
we have Ben Schimmoller. He is a longtime friend. He is what's your title at the office of Representative Scharf, just down the hall from where I work?
I'm a policy analyst there now.
Policy analyst. He used to work for somebody we both know, Senator Tim Knopp, as well. And Ben's one of these guys just like us. He's an addict. He's come to the Capitol and worked and then left and then come back again. And it's just, we can't ever seem to get away from this place.
Nope. But I had the privilege of also getting to work for then Rep. Lori Chavez-DeRemer, who's now Secretary Secretary of Labor.
I was going to say he fell forward a little bit. So, I mean, and now he's falling backwards. Oh, well, it's kind of fun. How was that working for a congressman? You were doing district work, right? So you go to D.C. occasionally, but the district work is a little bit of a grind.
It is, but I'll tell you what, the commute was a lot better than coming over from here from Redmond. But it was really great. One of the best parts about it, I always kind of say when you're doing district work is you're kind of a surface area level. Like you get to know everything a little bit, mile wide, kind of inch deep a little bit as you're. And it was really cool, too. One of our subcommittees, or the Congresswoman subcommittees, was aviation FFA stuff. And we have that Redmond Airport there. So getting to do a lot of tours and work with them on projects as they try to get some funding for terminal expansions and stuff like that was really cool and really interesting. And just you kind of get to hear so much more about the impacts and all the cool stuff going on in your community.
The worst part about flying, because there's really no connections. There are connections through Redmond, right? But it sucks if you actually try to connect through Redmond because you're screwed. You have to go out and then you have to come back in through security. You got to collect your bags and go. It's the worst thing in the world. I have some people that I know of that had to do some connections. They would fly because the Denver connect, and then if they're going to San Francisco or something, they have to connect. You have to leave security. And then you have to come back through security. So to actually have a terminal in which you could stay, inside security, that'd be kind of nice, right?
I've never thought about that because obviously I'm always either going or coming back. So, but that's a really good point. That sounds so obnoxious.
Yeah, totally. I had a friend and she texted me. She's like, what the hell is why do I have to leave this airport and then come back in?
Yeah.
And I was like, well, it is Redmond. It's a small airport. Well, that's kind of fun. Yeah. Glad to have you back of course, you're not in DC working for now the labor secretary, but that would not be a fun commute either. I mean, living in DC, you have to want to live in DC on that federal side of it. Like you have to truly want to be in that scene. It's fun to go to DC, but living there, I don't know, man. That would have been a lot.
Be a lot. Someday, love the opportunity. We'll see. Just take it a day at a time. But I really love, honestly, being back in the building and getting to see my buddies again. It's nice having the office next to Reagan's, where he's working for Representative VBI, who is my state rep. So always kind of nice to be able to lobby your member close at hand.
That's crazy. Well, good.
She's usually telling you I'm not going to do that, though, right?
Yeah.
I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. She's good. So, speaking of being addicted to stuff, Oregonians are addicted to things, but they're not as addicted to anything really out there as much as Democrats are addicted to taxes. And I think that this is a good time to have this conversation because a couple of weeks ago, Ben comes into work and he's got his testimony already and he's got his pin for his Zin and he's ready to go. And of course they never called on him because this building hates democracy and hates open process. I can't remember, frankly, the last time we had a big controversial bill and they even extended the hearing 30 minutes or an hour for that. They just take the regular committee time. They cut people down to 60 seconds or 2 minutes. And then as soon as they run out of time, they're like, well, feel free to submit written testimony, and then they just move on. And I feel like, especially this session, they've really just not had any interest in expanding the space for these bills that generate lots of controversy on both sides. That includes ending vote by mail, which we'll talk about later. But especially, the Zinn bill. I think last night was maybe the alcohol tax bill. And then there's this tire tax bill. I mean, I think they're kind of throwing everything at the wall to see what sticks. And one of the things I love about Oregon, as liberal as it is they just freaking hate taxes. I mean, they're voting them down every time they hit the ballot, and sending mass email in opposition to any kind of raising of taxes or new taxes. So, what was it like to try to testify, and why is it so important that we don't tax?
Was it like to try to testify?
The Zinn, Ben? Was it? Did it demoralize you? Did it make you hate democracy?
It was super moving to stand there for the meeting and watch. Actually, I was, obviously I had a little bit of a tongue-in-cheek testimony. I believe that we should hate the Zinn and not the Zinner, but this tax really is going to punish both Zins and Zinners, and it's really not fair to the consumer. But, the irony is that we're right now obviously in a revenue crunch, and now everyone's fearing federal funds being cut, and here they are proposing a bill that would dramatically impact products that are available on the shelf, and that the fiscal office even said was going to have dramatic revenue impacts. So if anything kills this bill, I think it'll be that, hopefully.
Is Zinn nicotine, though?
Yeah, it's just a bag of nicotine.
So wait, we hate smoking. We're trying to ban smoking?
It's synthetic nicotine.
No, not all of them. No, some of them are not synthetic. Some of them are.
It's not really the same as like Kodiak.
No, it's not. Yes, that's true.
So the amount of level of nicotine in it basically allows it to fall below certain federal standards and stuff like that.
On certain ones, yeah. I mean, they have different amounts per pouch. Like some of them are only like 2 milligrams, and there's European ones that are kind of entering the market a little bit. Some of them go up to like 15 plus a pouch, which is insane.
Well, Europeans love nicotine. You know that. I mean, those guys smoke like chimneys, and somehow they live longer.
Well, they walk more, right? They hate cars, so we love our cars.
Democrats here are trying to ban smoking as much as possible, but now they also want to tax these products that make it so people smoke less. I mean, that's what I don't understand about this.
And on top of that, too, like there's the big angle that, most of the testimony that was in there was targeted at kids not having access to vapes, and that the targeting and marketing on a lot of these vapes is for children, which, obviously we don't want kids, especially underage, vaping or smoking or anything like that. But, there's not 16-year-olds going in there and puffing up a flavored cigar or like a cigarette or even popping a Zinn in there, right? Like, I actually think it would have been interesting if they had just done an amendment to scrap everything else and just do flavored vapes, if that would have had more success moving. But
I think it would have. I think you're right. I think that the idea that you're doing a catch-all for the sake of the catch-all, and Senate Bill 702 is what we're talking about if anybody wants to go look it up. But I think the reality is that kids, I think it comes down to enforcement and prevention. And so you can't ban behavior.
No,
it just doesn't work, right? So you have to focus on prevention and enforcement. And so we have the enforcement mechanisms. We just don't really do it a lot, right? Yeah. We don't have, like at the little convenience store, if a 17-year-old comes in to buy, flavored stuff that they want to go smoke in the bathroom or whatever, we should be holding those convenience stores accountable for selling that product to underage people.
Well, and I think the convenience stores do want to be good partners in this. Yeah. They understand, a lot of their testimony was, we're the first line of defense and we take that responsibility seriously. And I absolutely believe them. I mean, they don't want to create problems, but they still want to be able to sell their product. I mean, that's a decent chunk of their revenue. And a lot of these are locally owned small family franchises or little shops. And, there was a lot of families that were American dream stories. They were immigrant families that came to America trying to open up a local shop that supported their community. And here we are, trying to hit them with something that in some cases could impact, double-digit percentage of their revenue.
Do you say immigrants own convenience stores? Is that what you just said?
That they were in there testifying that they were.
I'm just kidding. I think we always find that immigrants tend to go after businesses that have the lowest threshold of opening,
Right.
Which is great, right? I mean, convenience stores just happens to be one of those. I think that's the thing. I think we'll find with taxes that, and I don't really think we're in a low revenue scenario. I mean, I'm hearing that there's...
Sorry, let me...
Adopting
Yes.
the lib talking.
Yeah,
I'll rephrase
really
it. I was trying to say it from their alarmist point of view. I do
Yeah.
agree. We spend plenty, and we have plenty to work with, and we can definitely use it more efficiently.
I mean,
But the one party...
we need more tariffs. Isn't that what Trump said?
That's right. Yeah. We need tariffs on the Zins that will come from out of state, inevitably, when we ban flavor.
And the flavored tobacco for vapes, I mean, from what I've read into this, it mostly comes from some crazy Chinese billionaire.
Right.
It's all, black market shit
Yep.
that's getting out there. That's a real problem.
Well, and you're just going to encourage more of that. Like, they're going to find it online. They're going to get it shipped from out of states like Washington. If you don't think the kids, the Portland Metro can drive over the bridge and see their friends and get, secondhand market stuff there that will still make its way in, and that's unregulated, and that's the more dangerous stuff. I mean, and
well, in Prineville, everybody, if somebody knows anybody going to Boise, everybody says, pick me up a couple of rolls of chew because they know it's like half the cost in Idaho than it is in Oregon. So you're not going to change anything on the state level. I agree.
No, wait. We've banned criminals having guns. We banned drugs. We have crimes that are illegal, and now all that activity has just stopped. I mean, magically, once you make it illegal, nobody does it. So I don't understand what you guys are talking about, frankly. But
well, and even more so.
Wait a minute.
Yeah, to your point further,
just realized
censorship, as the great Mark Twain said, is telling a man he can't have a steak because a baby can't chew it. And I want to have my flavored Zin. Long, hard day, working hard, that 3:00 hour hits, I pop a Zin. I'm more efficient now. I didn't go outside and have a smoke break. I'm not wasting taxpayer dollars. There's a lot of staffers that Zin. And that's, we're trying to make tax dollars stretch further, be more efficient. We're responsible employees.
Of staff Zinners.
Gotta hate the Zin, not the Zinner.
I did laugh when you read me that line, Ben, in your testimony. I thought that was good. And frankly, it is a crime in Oregon that is not on the official video testimony. Do you submit written?
I haven't yet. I still might. So.
Okay. All right. Well, you only had 48 hours after the hearing to do it. You'll have to wait till the next time it gets heard, I guess.
Yeah. Well, I got one more for you. Let he who is without Zin still cast the first no.
Nice.
Oh boy.
Oh goodness.
Yeah. All right, so moving on. Yeah, from what about the alcohol tax thing? We had this discussion. I just want to touch on this one real quick because I think there has been a desired effort, not amongst all legislators, I think amongst a few, that no matter what they were going to do, they were going to move a bill forward to tax alcohol. And we know that Rep Sanchez, that was her thing with the task force. We talked about it. She's trying to bring it up to quote unquote today's, with the CPI and just say, well, if you just add inflation, blah, blah, blah. And I laugh at that because it's always about what they want. They'll use inflation. And then if we say, well, great, could we bring prevailing wage up to inflation?
No.
Oh, what? You can't do anything about that. And that's changed. I mean, $50,000 if you had inflation on that for prevailing wage triggers, that'd be somewhere around like $300,000 at this point. So It's silly. So if you want to use something to your benefit to pitch your story and then not use it for something else, I'm all in favor of like keeping things with inflation. They have to realize that just causes more inflation, by the way. If you had everything to bring it up to inflation, you just cause more inflation. And I think our job here was actually to fight against inflation and rising costs. But
I heard of that, but I haven't seen a single bill that the Democrats are pushing that does that. I mean, that's been my question all along. Is it's like housing? Who's working on reducing inflation? Republicans. Who's working on reducing costs of housing? Republicans. who's working on reducing the size and scope of government to hopefully reduce the inflation? Because the bigger and more expansive government gets, now this is more pronounced at the federal level. When the Fed spend a lot of money, that is what can trigger serious inflation. That's why we had that bad inflation out of COVID, because they were spending billions and billions of dollars. I mean, everybody had a slush fund. Every local government, every state government. The slush fund was so bad here, they literally were like, let's hand out $2 million to every rep and $4 million to every senator. Yeah, they even let Republicans spend money. That's how much money they had. So that caused a lot of inflation. And then now, obviously, talking about the cost of living is very important on the campaign trail. We always have the same talking points on the campaign trail because everybody's trying to focus on what voters care about. And then we get in here and it's magically like none of that ever happened. No. Right? And so that's where I'm still waiting for, and maybe they're just working on it, but everything they're putting forward, alcohol tax, tire tax, Zin tax, money for transit. I mean, great. Let's study more empty buses. Let's make the empty buses nicer. Let's make the empty buses run on electric. All of this stuff, they want raise the gas tax. You know that's coming, right? And that won't hurt anybody at all. And so everything's going to increase the cost of living. Where is the reduction in the cost of living coming from Democrats? And if I'm missing it, I want to hear about it, because I would be very surprised, one, if there is a bill, and two, if that bill didn't have some very serious flaws with it, which they usually do, because they're not typically about reducing the cost of doing things. They're about adding government hurdles and regulations that typically increase the cost, and they admit it increased the cost, but they say the things they're doing are more important than keeping the costs low, like with this prevailing wage thing. And prevailing wage on affordable housing, the bully commissioner seems to be taking every opportunity she has to make sure that any affordable housing project is prevailing wage. Now, that might be good for the trade unions and all the guys that are supposed to build these projects, unless it causes the projects not to get built in the first place, which is starting to happen now because these costs. And it's just like, I mean, there's a Willamette Week story about this guy in Astoria who was given $5 bills to all the homeless people in Astoria. And then he was like, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go raise a bunch of money, $500,000, I think, and convert what was an old motel into some affordable housing for homeless. That's, that is community-led, ground-up effort. And how does he get rewarded? Well, his project's prevailing wage, and he hasn't been able to build it in 6 years because now he has to go raise 35 to 50% more money. Congratulations. Thank you for doing your part to help the homeless. We're going to keep them homeless.
Well, we're in an emergency. We're in a housing crisis.
Yes.
Reagan. And so when you're in an emergency, you do everything you can to, get there, to achieve your goal, to end the emergency, obviously.
Yeah. Well, unless you're the unions, then you just go get what you want. Yep. And you tell people here that if you don't vote our way, we're going to stop the flow of money to you, which that Willamette Week article clearly pointed out that, Bully's sole contributor to those campaigns is the building trades. I mean, that's their sole contributor. That gives them money, and it's just
and it's now you understand why.
Yeah, right. Yeah, because they're going to block everything, and they'll even so right now, if you build an affordable housing complex and you get money from federal or state, right? If you get any sort of free money, grant money, even if you get a loan from the state, you can't build it above 4 stories, and you can't do anything on the ground floor outside of housing. So if you wanted to put a, child care center in there for, all the young families that are going to be living in the affordable housing, nope, can't do it. Right. And it doesn't just trigger prevailing wage for just that portion of the project. The entire project becomes prevailing wage. So now you're going to have these ground floors where they're trying to build these 4-story buildings in Portland, and then these ground floors are empty. Because you can't put any commercial spaces in there. You can't even put any nonprofits in there. Not like I would be in favor of nonprofits, but you can't even put nonprofits in there. You can't put the low-income dentist guy that wants to serve the community. He couldn't have a spot there. And we can easily fix that because we wrote the bill in the first place. We can easily change the law. But not only does it not get a hearing, Reagan, we didn't even it got thrown down to, well, maybe we'll do an informational, to the point to where they don't even want to hear it. They don't want nothing to do with it. And then they just say it's fake news, that it doesn't cost more, that prevailing wage doesn't cost more. They say 3 to 5% at best, because the cost of labor already has been going up so dramatically that the prevailing wage difference, and we can show them example after example where it's 30%, 40% more, and they just ignore it.
Yep.
And then they just come in, and that's where we really need the Democrats to stand up and say, are you, because really your whole point is for every, let's just call it 30%. For every 3 projects, we could build another one.
Yeah.
At 30%.
Yep.
Costs more. So instead of solving the housing crisis, we're choosing to reward our political friends. And that is the problem. That is the headline that we need to be telling people coming out of this building, that is the real problem. And the Democrats, they're in the pocket of them. They are the ones that are not allowing this to happen. We're there pushing it, and all we're getting is, no.
It's not just housing, too. It's other adjacent projects that impact it. There's the Terrebonne Sewer Project in Deschutes County that has been stalled out. And for years, this was a project that was going to be worked on by the state and ODOT and the county roads to rip open a lot of the ground in there. That Terrebonne is so in need of sewer infrastructure updates that they created their own special taxing district for it, which, if anyone doesn't know about Terrebonne, they fight tooth and nail to not make districts or anything. They love being unincorporated out there.
Yep.
And so the fact that they went and made this to tax themselves, and that actually they just keep having people vote themselves into the district to expand it.
Wow.
It impacts a huge amount of the population. Actually, there's a mobile housing unit out there that is some of the most affordable, low income, low barrier housing in Deschutes County. And that whole complex is at risk of going under because of sewer infrastructure, lack of sewer infrastructure.
Wow.
And so you're going to impact, you talk about a housing crisis now that you can't, so the whole story is that the governor added this project to one of the prevailing wage has to have a certain percentage come from a trade shop, and a certain amount of the people working on the project have to live in low income zip codes. Well, no one in Deschutes County, Central Oregon zip codes qualify for that.
Correct.
So you're going to have shops and workers coming over the mountains. And now Deschutes County roads is like, well, no one local can bid on this. So this whole pitch that this is supposed to put money in the local economy and empower these, local groups who are impacted by it, they're not getting that money. They can't even bid on it. And now the project's been delayed. It's been fighting in a lawsuit, and they've been trying to get it moving forward, and now the costs of it are just going up, and the risks of, there's a grocery store out there. It's it's the closest grocery store. They're at risk of going under if they continue to have problems with their septic tanks because they're so old, and it's really hard to put septic tanks out there in Central Oregon. So
that's what we had this conversation with Representative Javity. Where are we going to poop? That's a housing. This infrastructure directly relates to the housing crisis. And so, I think hopefully in the coming days, we'll see a little bit of an effort, maybe some contact with the bully commissioner from the legislature to say, hey, FYI, there's this housing emergency. Not sure you've heard of it. We would like you to use your authority in statute already to say, actually, for this period of time, I'm going to make sure that every affordable housing project, if it has a certain, and you can set your parameters, right? If you want a certain number of affordable units or something like that, right? Even something reasonable like that. I totally get that. You can put that in there, but I'm going to make it so that it's actually an achievable thing to not have prevailing wage tag your project so that the dollars go further. Because if the state, you saw the budget framework, the state budget writers basically said, we don't have billions of dollars to throw at housing. We don't have billions to throw at education. We don't have billions to throw at mental health and developing tons of new beds that they want to build. And prevailing wage is going to apply to all those projects too. Those things should be suspended while we are in these emergencies. And this makes me crazy. We're in this public defense emergency, but we're going to take years to fix the problem intentionally. It makes me crazy when we say, well, this is a problem and we need to solve it now. And then you know what we do? We don't solve it now at all. In fact, we make sure that all the solutions take years to do so that every single person that's a part of the stakeholder group gets their input, and everybody gets 90 days to type up all their fancy documents to say all the special things they want to say. Shut up. I'm tired of it. Put the people, the decision makers, the key deciders in a room, hammer it out, put the solution out there, and actually get it done. And I think we used to do that. I think we actually used to make laws. And now we sit around and we have work groups and we have task force and we give everybody a chance to have their input so everybody feels heard. And it's snowflake lawmaking. That's what I'm calling it now. Snowflake lawmaking. When you do 10 weeks of work groups and then you do a bill that kicks off your solution for 2 more years so you can have an official task force appointed by the governor.
Well, we don't even listen, though, to them. I mean, let's take the alcohol tax. Going back to that, the recommendation from those meetings was don't put a tax on it. That's not the fix. It's better off to look at what the resources we have and focus more on making them more efficient at preventing addiction or helping with that. And instead of, listening to them, we got a bill. There was a big hearing last night and, there was plenty of testimony on one of the members on the task force, the gentleman who owns Two Town Cider. I thought he gave great testimony. He came up and said, you asked us our opinion. We worked on this and we all told you no. And here you are doing it anyways.
Yeah. Aaron was on the podcast. Back in December. Yeah. And he's great. He actually had a lot of good things to say back then. Go back and listen to that podcast.
Yeah,
with
it's
Aaron.
a good one.
It was a good hour.
I'll link it.
where we really discussed and talked about why there's just not a need for it. And I think that's really. And the reality is if people are drinking less, those stats are clear as day, right? I mean, we see breweries closing, all that sort of stuff because people are drinking less. They're just not consuming alcohol like they were before. So the reality is that whatever it is that they're saying that they want to use the money for, it's already working. People are drinking less. Like I think it's down something like 12% or something.
Yeah.
Alcohol consumption. So, I mean, not between Ben and I mean, Reagan doesn't drink. So think about it, right? I mean, we're a third less in the room right here,
But I just want to make this clear, though, and it's a different public health question. The reason drinking is down is because drug use is up. Not amongst the three of us, but kids are not drinking because that's not the cool thing to do anymore. A lot of it is, unfortunately, it's drug use. But, again, you still can't ignore the fact that the drinking is going down, which means that those businesses are going to be challenged over the next few years. And so what do we do to challenge businesses? Well, we raise their taxes, of course.
And also kids weren't, my guess is they're not drinking, nice local Oregon made wine and craft beers, right? That's probably not what they're cracking into. So it's just, it only hurts Oregon businesses. We find a way to hurt our local businesses in our community that give good jobs, that use Oregon products and support our local farmers and help raise awareness of, what a special place this is. I mean, it's ridiculous that we're constantly robbing Peter to pretend like we're helping Paul. Yeah. And, it's always a solution in search of a problem.
Wasn't it I'm of course older than you two about the same age, but, when I was younger, Vicky and I laugh about this all the time because the girls always drink the Boone's wine. Yeah. It's that Boone's Farm wine stuff. And it's just that sweet, just nasty wine stuff that sometimes in the summer tastes good when it's on ice or something like that. Yeah. Which is no different than boxed wine, I think, these days. Yeah. But so none of that stuff is really going to change. I think it goes back to what I said before, prevention. Right. And also the other side of just making sure that, but people are going to kids are going to figure out a way. That's been the dawn of time. Right. Kids figuring out a way when adults tell them not to do something to go do it. So really just has to be through that education and the prevention, of that and making sure that people are responsible, because once you're over 21, you're over 18, whatever, so many things that you can do in life. Our job is just to teach our kids so they make good decisions.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And that's really you guys both have a kid, right?
On the way.
Yeah, on the way. That's right. Yeah. Reagan surprisingly has 3.
Who knew?
Yeah.
You wouldn't know by looking at me.
No, but
you should thank your wife.
I do.
Get her some flowers or something.
She wakes up in the morning or he wakes up in the morning and goes, "Oh yes, this isn't a dream. I'm still married. I got kids. Somebody actually loves me." Because Knopps are notoriously great communicators. So
yeah,
no comment.
Hey, On my last thing on the prevailing wage thing, and we can move on to another topic, is I really want to stress, though, why we want to expand this prevailing wage in the housing crisis. And it's because those workers in those building trades probably all voted for Trump, or most of them do. There are voters. And I know their union bosses are trying to look out for, quote unquote, their best interest, but they're really not, because their best interest is making sure that there's more projects for them to work on, that the longevity of their job would continue, and more projects could be done in more parts of the state. Because right now, a predominant amount of all of those affording housing projects are from Eugene to Portland. And we know that, and you can't really do prevailing wage projects in rural parts of Oregon, like you were talking about with the Terrebonne thing, because it's very hard to find people who know how to do the paperwork, have the crews, the staff, the back office work in a low income zip code to be able to even do a prevailing wage job. And that's a big piece of the problem. And I think that that's just crap. All you're doing is protecting the big, huge companies that know how to do prevailing wage work. They can do the paperwork. They can do all the things they need to do. And that is what's hampering even the prevailing wage side of stuff. And it's been a real problem. And you also don't have a building trades union willing to actually help us solve the problem. They just want to say, give us more. And that's all unions right now, as they try to, quote unquote, protect themselves from the Trump administration, which, again, most of their members probably voted for Trump.
So last thing, because apparently I have a legislative meeting that I'm supposed to go to here shortly, so I don't want to miss it. I wanted to just do a couple minutes on, do you guys remember a couple of weeks ago, feels like ancient history, when Senate Democrats were maybe threatening to shut down the government because they didn't like the CR. And then like a handful of them voted to pass it through and then they got just absolutely roasted by their side. There were so many Democrats who were like, I don't understand what these guys are doing. I don't understand why they aren't willing to stand up to Trump and shut down the government. And I just laughed, because we'd gone through similar politics here with Senate Republicans. Did we talk about this on the podcast already? I can't remember. The shutdown, politics of the shutdown, and this gets into what I'm talking about here with what levers do you have to pull as a minority? Okay. And can you credibly pull those levers and be able to make the opposition think you're actually going to do what you're going to do? And at the end of the day, they knew there's enough Democrats. I think the Republicans knew this, and I think the Democrats were clear on this. There was enough Democrats that were not willing to shut down the government because they were worried that it was going to turn them into an extremist party. And they don't want to be, at least those few don't want to be the extremist party. They want to try to paint Trump to be the extremist. And they felt that by shutting down the government, they're playing right into Trump's hands. Government shutdown will allow them to lay off a bunch more people, close more programs, and all this stuff. And then you have to figure out, okay, what's the plan to reopen the government? Because you're not going to get the opening offer that Trump gave you. You're going to get a worse offer. And then they're going to pull that and they're going to give you a worse offer until you relent, basically. And you take your third worst offer instead of the original one. And I was trying to explain this to people. And so whenever you start down a road of, in Oregon, the tools are different. It's reading bills, right? They have to get 2/3 votes in order to suspend the rules to not read bills. So that's a tool that we have in the toolbox. Obviously walkouts, but that's been limited some now, because if you walk out, you can't run for that re-election, basically, right? And that's pretty much it that we have left. Minority reports delay things a little bit. There's not a lot left, for the minority here. And I think that was, that could have been true similarly. When Republicans were in the majority here, we pretty much steamrolled the Dems. The only backstop that they were lucky enough to have was the governor could veto stuff, right? And so, I just want to talk to you guys about, and all the Democrats now need to stop listening, because this is obviously top secret Republican strategy conversation. Right. We don't have any Democrat listeners, but if we did, they should stop listening right now, because this is top secret. But
pause so they can stop listening.
Right.
Thanks for joining us.
Now that all the Democrats aren't here anymore, what is and what do you think Republicans have to do to be effective in the minority with the tools that we have? What's effective? Maybe what's not effective?
So I personally think walkouts beyond the obvious surface level have been super hampered with, because you can't run again. But a real big impact of that then becomes you have freshmen or a less experienced caucus. And quite frankly, let's look at the gun bills are a great example. They just bring them back. And quite frankly, they're worse. And now you have potentially fewer members too, because you're also hoping that their voters don't politically punish you by taking a seat out of your caucus on walkouts, that you can even win that seat back with a new candidate. And now you're fighting with fewer members against. I just think the gun bills are a rough example of that. They'll just bring them back again. And so now we've lost some really great experienced senators, and for, something that they're coming back for again. It's tough, but I do like reading bills a lot. I think that's an important strategy because it makes people understand that we're here. And you have to have a locked up caucus for it, for sure, and ready for do the fight. And they're going to be long days. But I mean, this is more an extreme example. You could whenever they ask to suspend the rules to close it, and you could say, no, we're going to stay here and impact the committee hearing timelines. And now this can impact what bills could get heard in committee. And then all of a sudden agendas get impacted that way.
Yeah, I think that, I appreciate the idea of reading bills. And I think there was a time and a place for reading bills, especially early on. Do you remember when we first started reading bills? Like, they didn't have the machine, and so poor Clark had to sit up there and read the bills. Like,
they earned every penny of their paycheck.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So and I always think when the minority does things, then the majority, they have the levers of not necessarily retribution, but they have the levers to do the workarounds. So in came the bill reading machine, and then all of a sudden they were reading it at 1.5 speed. Remember that? It was like blah, 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 blah. And everybody's like, well, the Constitution says it has to be this, audible in a way that somebody said. Now they had to slow it down, and so then, but they also now with the bill reading machine, they give you an exact time clock, so they know, because of AI, right? It can tell you exactly how long. And so what's going to happen is if you bill read now, the Democrats basically just start doing calculations. They just run, okay, what's the bills that we want to run through the House? What's coming over from the Senate? They can make a calculation and they just add days, and they can add more floor time. They can keep us here at from 5 o'clock to 9 o'clock, and they're just going to read bills, and you can't really leave, because if you leave, they'll just give you an unexcused absence. Yep. So the two of those things working together really kind of hamper, I think, the minority in a way that makes it very difficult, because bill reading was great because everybody had to enjoy the pain, right? I mean, it worked for a time because both sides had to endure the pain of the reading of the bills. And now they can basically force, because then the Republicans could do the bill reading and then we walk out. Well, now, you're not really going to walk out, because I do agree with your point that if you lose members in this building and you get a bunch of freshmen that come in, what you lose is you don't necessarily lose the experience, which you do, but what you really lose is relationships.
Yeah.
And the one thing that can kill a bill that is a bad bill brought on by the majority is somebody in the minority that has a really good relationship with that majority member, and they can go to them and say, this is a bad bill and here is why. And that relationship allows that person to maybe rethink why they're putting that bill forth. Maybe they say, you know what? Yeah, it isn't ready for prime time yet. Let's do some more work on it. Let's do another stupid work group. Either way, and those are the levers that I think are more impactful here versus in the building, is what I'm saying. They're more impactful in the building of getting better policy. We're not going to find great policy, because you can't put Democrats and Republicans in a building for 6 months and expect them to get along and come up with great policy. I think what would also help, and we talked about it before, is if we went to 100-day sessions every year.
That'd be great.
Just because, again, 180 days of staring at somebody, even though you're getting along for a little while, eventually that sandpaper is going to rub against each other. And I think it's a problem. And I think that's really the biggest thing. I think if you look at it, I think we accomplish more in short sessions than we do in long sessions. I think we get the bigger, broader policy discussions done better in a short session because we're forced to come to conclusions quicker. And here you give more time for all the crazy right-wing and left-wing groups to weigh in on an issue. So then, time goes by and holdover, and that's just more time for somebody with a nut job idea on the far left to get to a Democrat legislator and say, no, they're wrong. This is what's wrong with it. You got to do this. And I think that's really the problem with it. I think shorter time periods would be better for both sides if they really wanted to get to more nonpartisan type policies.
Also, bill limits.
Yeah, bill limits are an interesting concept for sure. I think that would cut things down a little bit. The minority always hates that we have, but I think they realize they control the calendar, so bill limits really wouldn't affect anything. And the average legislator, I happen to know this. Somebody might have told me that there was a chart floating around somewhere in this building that shows of who put in how many bills and all the things. And there's bad actors on both sides of the aisle on the number of bills.
How do we get that? We got to get that.
That person that I know has that is probably listening to the podcast. So maybe but the average number of bills, I think she told me it was like 24 or 26 bills.
Oh, really?
Like the average.
Yeah.
If you did everybody what
Sure.
they have. And that seems to be kind of a thought process that's catching a little bit of steam. I know it's been bantered around for a while. Minority's always been against it because it, goes against like our ability to put bills in.
Sure.
I'd rather see more bills that are impactful, right? Because most of those bills are going to die anyways. They're not even get hearings.
Yep.
And usually those are carryover bills.
Yeah.
That people have from years past that never got a hearing and they just keep putting them in. It doesn't make any sense. What I would do in the minority, to answer your question, Reagan, I wouldn't read bills because I think everybody hates reading bills and I think they think reading bills is stupid. And I believe that it doesn't really help your agenda. What I thought was going really well with the minority when they were doing the little press conferences and they were garnering, 6, 7 reporters showing up at those things and they were getting good social media feeds. And then they've now just stopped. Like, when was the last one? I thought that stuff was pretty impactful. I thought those things were good. I think that the wildfire stuff that we did, Golden literally put in a bill to kill his own bill, which is, awesome. But I think that is what I would be doing. I would force the issue by utilizing the press. And that's the one thing the press likes to show up for those press conferences because they're always afraid of what are they going to miss out on. So the FOMO with the press is a great opportunity when you're in this building. And that's how I would use it is creating strong comms and having that ability to do in all different angles, right? Every different angle you can to put out our message of what they're doing that we disagree with. But we can't just be babies crying. We got to say, this is how Oregon should be moving forward, not this way. That's my 2 cents.
Well, we're hearing the bell, which means it's time for us to go. Ben, thank you for being on the podcast, and we will close out once again back to the greatest AI-generated song about the Oregon legislature.
Oh, no, you're going to play it again?
Ever. Yes, I'm going to play it again. I'm definitely. Listen, I won't play it every single week.
No,
this
won't.
is the only. This is the only time, but I'm maximizing the time in the spotlight here. It's probably also the only AI-generated song about the Oregon legislature until I write another one. There's more coming. Stay tuned. I'm doing some space, giving people some space, letting the songs breathe, but there's definitely more coming.
That's how you're going to fund this podcast, make an album, release it.
Yeah, all right, I like that.
Yeah. Look for the Crosstabs album coming soon to Spotify and Apple Music.
Thanks, man.
Thanks, guys.
Representatives and senators meet, trading words to find the perfect beat. right.